If I could have everyone's attention, I'd like to call the November 12th, 2024 meeting of the Forsyth County Board of Education to order. We have before us an agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion by Wes, second by Mike. All in favor? Unanimous. I'd like to welcome everybody. We hope that, as Mike said, you show up with as much enthusiasm in here as we were hearing out there. If we could all rise, we'll have the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, first we have our presentation and discussion items. First on the list is the 26-27 school calendar with Josh Lowe. Dr. Josh Lowe, sorry. I thought he was just Josh.
Josh will be just
Joshua Lamar Lowe.
That was my dad's name.
Yes. All right. Good evening. Going to look back over our school calendar proposal. We did have an opportunity to take feedback since I presented the initial calendar to you guys a few weeks ago. So just for a quick review, we provided the initial draft to our local school councils, cabinet, and principals on October 9th through the 18th. And then, as you should recall, we presented to you guys on October 22nd. The very next day, we posted the draft that was presented to you on the 22nd on our website and shared it out with our community through November 5th, where we collected feedback. And I'd like to talk through that with y'all now. As a quick reminder to anybody listening, we must have 178 student days, 190 teacher days. We always work to balance our days as best we can between first and second semesters. Traditionally in Forsyth County, we work not to start school before August 1st and to complete school each year by Memorial Day weekend. And we always work to protect fall, Thanksgiving, and spring breaks, which our community generally seems to enjoy overall. And please be reminded that anytime we move a day, we have to place it elsewhere. The initial calendar, and I won't go into this too far, but just this was what was initially presented to y'all. It did include a Wednesday start. It included some days in March that, based on feedback, we wound up moving. And it did have our initial proposal for fall break. Actually, the last full week in September, which based on feedback, we moved a week later just to kind of balance that between the start of school and Thanksgiving break. So looking at those adjustments, and this is what I actually shared with you on the 22nd that we put out to our community for feedback, and it indicates those things that based off those feedback let me back up. Based off the feedback that we got from local school councils, principals, and leadership cabinet, we did make the adjustments that I was sharing, not to start on a Wednesday, which moved it to Thursday, as well as moving fall break to the 28th of September. That does spill over a couple of days into October, but that balanced that week between the other breaks that we have. It also adjusted the initial proposal, which included an early release day and a actual holiday that we were trying to build in March to be a K-12 online learning day and a professional development day based off of feedback to our principals and our cabinet and our local school councils. So those were the adjustments from the original one that were highlighted in the four areas that have arrows there. We put this out to our community the morning of the 23rd, including the start date as was proposed, which you can see the previous years. I left this in here just for the institutional consistency if y'all needed to see that one more time. But the feedback starting on the 23rd, we garnered 639 total responses. In those responses, and you'll see the math would add up to be over 639, but some of the people, for example, perhaps were employees and were also parents, or community members. With that said, out of the 639, 439 total indicated that they were parents in our district. 5 students provided feedback, a total of 288 staff members, and 19 community members. Overwhelmingly, the feedback on the proposal was positive. People seemed generally glad that we were maintaining our breaks and did have 2 full weeks consistent in December and spilling into the start of January through the holiday season. And we were able, with the adjustments that we made based off of the initial proposal, to get school to start on a Thursday, which is typically what's preferred in our community. A few that were suggested that that we did consider that perhaps we couldn't do for a variety of reasons, including the bookend dates of August 1st and Memorial Day. One, and I'll show this to you on the next slide, but a needed adjustment was needed. I'm going to call this a rookie mistake. But as we were making that, as we moved the other day, if you'll look here where the star is pointing to the 27th, when I presented this to you before, and this is my rookie mistake, but I still had that highlighted blue as an employee day, which was an error on my part. The actual first day should have been the 28th, and in doing that, that is the correct number of teacher work days, and it allows allows teachers to come back on that Tuesday and not on that Monday. So based on all feedback, that's something I hadn't caught, but we did have a handful of employees that caught that. So what's proposed here should be the right number of employee days, with the other changes that were suggested not being things we could do, such as some parents requesting to start later in August or to get out earlier in May. You couldn't do that without moving days elsewhere. That made things kind of inconsistent. A handful wanted to remove early release days, as well as less total pre-planning days. And as we had previously discussed, if you remove the pre-planning days, they turn into post-planning days, which means you got to come back after Memorial Day, which is something that we don't typically want to do. So the calendar before you here with the one adjustment is what I would like to submit as a proposal for consideration for y'all to review and come back December 10th and present that for approval for the 26-27 school year.
The less pre-planning days, that just came from the general survey that was put out on or did it come from local school council or anything like that?
That was what was put out on the 23rd. We put it out to our community, and on that there were 288 staff members. And some of the feedback was less pre-planning days, but the only place to move those would be basically post-planning, which would be after Memorial Day. So we weren't able to make that. We weren't able to make that adjustment, or we would have been coming back later in May and spilling into June.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Any other questions? All right.
Okay, thank you.
We'll see y'all to finalize on the December 10th. Thank y'all.
All righty. Okay, next we have,
Is this the final version?
yes, that's what he said,
So
yeah.
do we need to, does that need to be formally adopted by you or no?
December 10th.
December 10th, I missed that, okay. Wow, that's a long stretch.
As we mentioned last month, that was due to the Thanksgiving break.
All right, great. Thank you, sir.
Okay, T&L data review. Amy Bartlett, how are you today?
Great, how are you?
Good.
Great. Get things pulled up here. Okay, well, good evening. I am Amy Bartlett, so proud to represent our Teaching and Learning Department alongside two of my amazing colleagues, Dr. Heather Talent, who is our Coordinator of Assessment, and Mr. Tim Kieser, our Coordinator of Accountability. And we are very excited to have the opportunity today to come to you and present the student assessment update related to our Georgia milestones for 2024. We want to be sure that we align our presentation always to our district goals. And you can see here, this is right in line with our strategic plan, the learner experience, which is to increase student growth and achievement, as well as our board governance goals, aligning our strategies, initiatives, and resources to our learner profile, and of course, effective and efficient financial planning. I certainly want to start by saying, as I'm new to the role, it has really been a tremendous help for the restructuring of our teaching and learning department. We are now very laser focused on Tier 1 instruction and accountability to make sure that all of our students are performing at high levels. And I think today, through this presentation, you'll see we have some data that can guide us in our strategic priorities and our efforts to make sure that we're enhancing our student outcomes and our district performance. You will see from our presentation today, we'll highlight our strengths as well as our opportunities for growth and the plans that we currently have in place to address those needs that we have. So with that said, I'll turn things over to Dr. Talent.
All right, good evening. We're going to start, before we get to the data, we're going to start with a couple of points just to make sure that we're clear on, before we get to that data, the purpose of the milestones. So the Georgia Milestones measures how well students have learned the knowledge and skills that are outlined in the standards. And we do that in ELA, math, science, and social studies, of course. We do that through two different prongs, EOGs, end of grade assessments, and EOCs, end of course assessments. So those EOGs are given, of course, in ELA and math in grades 3 through 8. They are given in science, grades 5 and 8, and then we take social studies EOG in grade 8, as well as the high school physical science EOG in grade 8. The EOCs, end of course tests, are associated with courses, and we have 4 of those that the state has identified. We have algebra, concepts and connections, American literature and composition, biology, and United States history. So before we, of course, dive into the data, you're going to see percentage levels, and I just want to make sure that we're all speaking the same language when we talk about those percentages. So we're going to be talking in achievement levels. There are 4 achievement levels for the milestones. Our beginning learners are students who do not yet demonstrate proficiency in knowledge and skills embedded in the standards. Our developing learners are students who demonstrate partial proficiency. Proficient learners demonstrate proficiency in those knowledge and skills, and distinguished learners demonstrate advanced proficiency. And in the data, you will see percentages. All of those percentages are combining our proficient learners and our distinguished learners. So anyone who is proficient or above. And then 2 summary points that I want to start off with before Tim dives into the data slides. Amy mentioned, obviously we want to look at the data and we want to look at where we have areas of strength and where we have areas for improvement. So along the areas of strength, FCS, our students achieve the highest scores in the state among large systems for all math EOG grade levels, as well as 6th grade ELA, algebra, American literature, and biology. And then along those areas for growth, we're continuing to employ targeted strategies, and Amy's going to talk through those at the end of the data slides, because we still maintain that goal of returning to pre-pandemic performance levels. And so that's going to obviously require us to look at what those strategies are that we need to incorporate to get us to those pre-pandemic levels in areas where we are not. So now I'm going to turn it over to Tim, and Tim is going to walk us through several data slides.
Okay, good evening. And I think it's important to mention that one of the things you're going to see in here, we've got on several slides, there'll be an asterisk that represent whether we were the highest system in the state in terms of our score for that test. And what we use for that is 1,000 students or greater tested. So it's an individual grade level or individual test. So that's the metric that we use. That roughly converts to 14,000 students in a school system. So when I say large system, that's what we're using. But I wanted to point that out early because, as Dr. Talent mentioned, we're not back to pre-pandemic levels, but you will see consistency when we get to the longitudinal slides that are going to show that ranking where we were at the top pre-pandemic to now. So as she mentioned, we've got targeted strategies. That's what we're working toward, but I just wanted to point that out as we move through the presentation. So this is a combination of grades 3 through 5 for 2024. So this is last year's testing. So for ELA, that's all 3 grade levels in elementary school. I'm sorry, 3rd through 5th in elementary school, and then math, 3rd through 5th. Science is only tested at the 5th grade level. For middle school, combination grades 3 through 8, we've got our ELA, our math, and then physical science and social studies are the ones that are different. I'll skip to social studies, that's only tested at the 8th grade level. With physical science, what we have listed here is the high school physical science course and not the 8th grade science course. And that's because the vast majority of students in 8th grade in Forsyth County take the high school physical science course. We give them, all students, that opportunity to earn that high school credit in 8th grade. And because of that, we can't make a direct comparison to the 8th grade science. I'll speak more to that later on a longitudinal slide. These are end-of-course courses. So as Heather mentioned, these are associated not with a grade level, but with a course. So our American literature, algebra, biology, and U.S. history. The note here at the bottom is saying that since a difference between pre-pandemic and post-pandemic is that for U.S. history, our advanced placement, international baccalaureate, and dual enrollment students do not take this test. So those students are not included in the data.
Is it safe to say, Tim, if all of our AP and dual enrollment and IB kids were back in there, that number would be higher?
Yes, sir, it'd be significantly higher.
Okay.
Okay, this slide is showing you, this is still concurrent testing for 2024. This is each grade level for a particular subject area, in this case ELA. So you can see 3rd grade up through American Lit at the high school level. This is the first slide that has that indicator at the top of the bar that shows you, in this case for grade 6 and American literature, that we had the highest score in the state. That's using the mean scale score for the test. You'll often see throughout the presentation that the state grade level trends year over year, the contour of that trend is often matched by the system. So sometimes when we see a difference between a particular grade level and the next, significant difference, we're wondering, okay, is that unique to the system, or is that something that we saw across the state or similar systems? This is the same type of slide. This is for math. You'll notice here every assessment, so every grade level, including algebra, Forsyth County Schools had the highest scores for large school systems. This is for science. So in this case, grade 5 is the only elementary grade that tests science, grade 8 for physical science, and then biology at the high school level. I do want to point out that one of the things that we noticed when we were looking at those rankings, because that's part of what we do when the results come out, because we're looking to see, well, where does Forsyth County Schools, and with our individual schools, where do they land within the state if we're looking at the average scale score for these tests? I want to point out that all of the assessments where we were not first, we were either second or third, and that's all EOGs up through the EOC courses. Social studies milestones, so this is grade 8, social studies and U.S. history at the high school level. There's the note again at the bottom that our advanced placement, international baccalaureate, and dual enrollment students do not take this assessment. These are the longitudinal results. We can't do a ranking with these because this is a combination. What we're doing is we're combining our grades 3 through 8. Grades 3 through 8 for each one of the tests. So in this case, ELA. And that's not the format that the state uses when they for their public release, but this is something we look at. So we're essentially looking at similar to what we looked at before for an individual year, each grade level. This is combining those grade levels, pre-pandemic through post-pandemic.
Can I ask a question? So when you think about pre-pandemic, it's really current 4th graders now, right? Because when they went in, they were in kindergarten. So 3rd grade, they weren't really affected by the pandemic, or are we thinking that they are because of pre-pandemic? Like, I guess how far back are we going to go when we look at pre versus, because when we look at pre-pandemic, I think it would be good to look at each grade level instead of combining.
So, yes, so 2019 is the last year that we used. That was the 18-19 school year. The 2 years that are missing at the bottom of this are what we're considering the pandemic years. And the reason that the data is not included for 2020 because there was no testing that year.
Right, no, I understand that. I guess I'm just wondering, like, when you think about the kids that were in school.
If maybe you could go back to the ELA slide with the ELA, Tim, because it does break apart the grade levels. We would say that third grade is definitely impacted from pandemic levels. Correct. Yes, we are still seeing that is an impact.
So it would be third grade and fourth grade.
Yes,
And it shows really on those numbers. Mhm.
absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, I'm glad you asked the question, because so 2020 had no testing. 2021 had limited participation with testing, and so it's not comparable in this case. So that's why that one's not here.
But I think when you look at this, a story that's in there is the fact that the state has gotten back to pre-pandemic levels, but we haven't yet,
That's correct.
correct?
Yes.
And that's part of what you're going to talk about, the targeted focus at the end. But I think it's important that we're transparent and not gloss over that.
What's the rationale? What's the rationale for combining grades 3 through 8?
This was something that we wanted to do to look at full system performance for each year. So typically, if you were to look back at previous year, the same type of presentation, it was normally the prior year compared to the current year. So we were looking at when we would combine, and we did combine them. We did it in both views in that case. And the reason we did that was because we were simply comparing the prior, did we grow or did we see a decrease? In this case, we wanted to show full system performance in a particular subject area, year over year, going back to the 16-17 school year. We can.
So you're not digging into this to look at with this particular set of data, you're not looking at a particular group of kids. Right now, you're looking at a subject area at a K-12, with a K-12 lens, in this case, or 3-8 lens in this case, right?
That's right. I mean, many of them are the same students as they move through their career, but this is all students who took the milestones EOG, so grades 3 through 8, each one of these years combined.
But you could drill down into individual cohorts of kids to see how they've done from year to year.
5 or 6 to 8, like elementary versus middle.
The challenge is that a group that took a test in 5th grade, they don't take a milestone again until 8th grade. And so you've got gap years in there, which makes it really difficult to track from year to year how a specific group of kids is doing, because they have that spaced out.
I mean, but that is work that we do, and we can certainly get that data to you. This is the same view for mathematics. This is science for 5th grade. All right, so this is a case where it's only one grade level. And social studies, 8th grade. So physical sciences, this one has more changes than any of the others. You'll notice at the top of the pre-pandemic years, it says 8th and 9th grade students. Excuse me. That's because this was a high school EOC course, so end of course, like the other ones in the presentation. This course was removed as one of the EOCs in between the pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. So post-pandemic, this is a high school course that no longer has an EOC. So if a 9th grader were to take this course, that student would not take any state assessment at the end. But if an 8th grader takes this course, because they're required to take an end of grade or end of course assessment in that subject area, science in this case, in 8th grade, if they take the high school physical science course, then this is the assessment that they have to take. So that's why physical science on the left side, end of course, middle school and high school. The right side, only middle school. Another thing I want to point out here, this goes back to what I spoke to earlier. In Forsyth County Schools, all of our students take high school physical science in 8th grade. Many other systems don't do that, right? What they'll do is more similar to what we do with algebra as that high school course. They'll identify those students who are going to be most successful, and those are the students who take the high school physical science course. The other 8th grade students will take the 8th grade course, which means our entire set of data here is compared to most other systems students who were only selected to take that course.
So our mass numbers of 8th graders are being measured against the select group at the rest of the state.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
There are other systems who test or have all other students take the high school physical science, but when we look at those comparable systems, to us, it's often not the case.
Okay.
Even with the numbers that you're seeing, if you look at systems who tested 1,000 students or more in high school physical science, we were third with our score in the state for those systems. This is the longitudinal view for algebra. So this is a good example of, if you look, we've been at the top with that mean scale score in the state every year, pre-pandemic up through now. But we're still not back to where we want to be. We haven't reached that pre-pandemic level, but we are consistently at the top. The same is true for biology. And also true for American literature. And if you look at 2024 here to 2019, which is that last comparison we have, this is a case where we are almost back to that same percentage of proficient and higher. And this is U.S. history. And so this is the one I mentioned earlier, and I've got that note on the right side of the screen, where those students post-pandemic are no longer taking, that's our AP, our IB, and our dual enrollment students are no longer taking the EOC when they take this course.
I have a question.
Yes.
Could you go back to the 3rd through 8th grade slide? So is that the one you just provided?
This is math. We've got this for ELA also.
Okay. And then, so that was ELA and that was math. Those are the only two slides. And then the next one goes to just 5th grade science. Why is it not 3rd through 8th?
So science.
Is it just in 5th grade?
It's only, this course is only, so in the state several years ago reduced the number of required state assessments. And so they removed, this used to be 3rd grade and 5th grade for science with milestones. They removed the 3rd grade test. So now it's only tested at 5th grade.
Okay. And the same with the next slide, which would be social studies.
So social studies is not tested in elementary
grade or
school at
so, yeah,
all. It's
perfect.
only at 8th grade.
Okay. That makes sense. Thank you.
I'm still a little bit stuck. Sorry.
No problem.
I'm stuck on the rationale. ELA and math are tested 3rd, 5th, and 8th, right?
ELA and math are tested grades 3 through 8th, every grade level.
Every grade level. So different kids are going to be, different age groups would have been affected differently by the pandemic. So I'm still not grasping, why are we combining 5 years worth of students into one? How is that targeted if we're taking 5 years and lumping them together?
Well, in this chart, this is just a single chart that shows the combined, right? But in the work that we do, and I don't want to take away from Amy's slides, but in the work that we're doing, we dig into this in different ways. So we are looking at it in that way, and we can provide that information.
So that's either still to come, or if not, you can provide that to the board so they can see that.
Thank you.
And for me, while I like looking at the state of Georgia, after 20 years of looking at the state of Georgia, I want to see the other comparable large districts along there. So have all three of them, kind of like, here's us, here's all the comparable districts, and then here's state, to kind of see where we're at. Sometimes when you're so far ahead of the pack, you're not supposed to look back in the race. And not that we're racing. This is not the scores that we see. This is just the results of the work we do, focusing on the core things that are in the student profile. So, But it would be nice to know kind of how we stack against other districts to see, are we an anomaly? Is it good? Is it bad? Kind of where we can put those extra focus.
And we have a report that does that, and we can provide you with access to that.
They're working the bugs out, but I got to go in and play with it, and you're going to love it once it's done, because you'll be able to click on different systems, and it'll put it side by side with ours for you to
I
be
mean,
able
it's
to
a
look at.
long way from where we were years ago. We used to bring a 3-ring binder in with paper, and I couldn't move the data between the components. So we've come a long way, but yeah, I want to see that extra data.
We will get that to you. Okay.
And I'm sure you will have questions. I welcome those. I want to assure you that we are examining this data to the granular level with all of our leaders. So when you talk about individual grade levels, I can assure you that we do that with all of our level leaders, and we'll continue to do that. There's no question, as I mentioned at the beginning, data tells a story. And what we get from this are areas that we can celebrate and really have accolades. And there's also areas for opportunities for improvement, and we know that. One of those areas I want to highlight today is the area of literacy in English language arts. I think historically, if you look at our data across the system, that is our area that we are most in need of having improvement efforts. And it's already a highlight of our strategic plan within the learner experience. So I just want to spend a couple minutes articulating what we are doing and what we have in the works to address bolstering student achievement in that area. You're going to hear a little later this evening about the legislation that's come out in Georgia related to literacy, and that legislation targets K through 3. But I'm very proud to stand here tonight to tell you we don't view this as a K through 3 issue with literacy. It's a K-12 issue that we need to address. And we do have a K-12 vision for literacy in our district. We are working very, very hard to address this throughout all of our schools. There is targeted literacy instruction that is evidence-based and research-based, targeting all of the domains. We are implementing high-quality instructional materials aligned to the science of reading, and that's happening. You're going to hear about elementary tonight, but I can say the same about our middle school and our high schools, who this year have new resources that are very evidence-based, targeting vocabulary, targeting comprehension, targeting those measures that we need for all of our students to have that strong foundation in literacy. Our elementary teachers are right now in the process of going through a 25-hour modules of professional learning related to literacy instruction and the science of reading. And most importantly, right now we're really seeing our gaps. Lindsay, I think you mentioned those grade 3 and 4. That's where we're noticing the biggest gaps in that 3-8 space. And we realize that the pandemic did have an impact. And how do we come back in and provide students with those foundational skills that they may have holes or deficits in still? We are universally screening all of our kindergartners through 5th graders, doing that 3 times a year with targeted instruction to fill those gaps. We also have provided foundational opportunities for those students lacking those skills at both the middle school and the high school. We had a foundational cohort. Every one of our middle schools participated and had extra support classes for those students that still had deficits in those areas. And this year, we're launching that in our high schools in 9th grade with extreme reading. So I want you to know that we have a K-12 approach to literacy. There is nothing that's more important that we can do within teaching and learning than provide that solid foundation for our students. And upon us, for the 25-26 school year, the state will roll out new standards. So we're busy preparing our teachers to incorporate that. We're going to see a lot of multimodal pieces coming out. We're evolving with the times, and some of our traditional testing that has been done in that paper pencil format is going to look differently. And we could give you a preview of that of another time, but we really have to equip our students with the ability to analyze information. Their literacy is going to look different, to your point, Mr. Cleveland, about years ago than ours did going through school. And those new standards are going to take us to a new time in preparing our students for that. So we have a lot of work in the arena of literacy. You're going to hear some more specifics about K-3 a little bit later tonight, but this is one of our fundamental areas of focus that we have through teaching and learning.
I have a question about ELA.
Yes.
So this ELA standard is going to come out 25 to 26.
Yes.
It's going to be K through 3rd?
12, all the way through 12th grade.
Okay. Is there a new standard out now for 4th and 5th grade, or is that?
Not right now. We are still under the Georgia Standards of Excellence. The new standards will roll out next year as a K-12 unit.
And as you guys are rolling this out, you're also helping with the content through content specialists that help with all that?
Absolutely. One of them
Okay.
is here today. Dr. Courtney Bean is our elementary literacy specialist.
Okay.
She will highlight our elementary work today. Allison Crouch is 6 through 12, and they are both in buildings with job-embedded professional learning, working side by side with teachers and cohorts
Okay.
to train them.
But I think it's important just to recognize, this is just in English, that we've got new literacy and dyslexia legislation
Yes.
that has required hours upon hours on our teachers to go through all those learning modules. On top of that, we've got new instructional materials, and now we're about to throw them into a whole new set of standards. Our teachers at all levels, but certainly our elementary teachers they're being ground up. And Amy and her staff and Derek and his staff and the Sarahs and Karas out there, they're doing a tremendous job of trying to keep morale going and keep the energy going. But you can see right here in front of you, it is a lot coming at them.
And that's where the content specialists come in to help the
Yes.
teachers with content. Talking to some teachers in the community about the support and like, well, we just don't have content for this. We don't have content for this. So I think that's one of the ways that we can support the teachers through this transition is let's give them content.
For the resources, absolutely. And I want to just publicly thank our Board of Education for having the foresight to put instructional coaches
Yeah, I was just
in
gonna
every
say,
one of
they're-
our schools. This board has had that vision that those coaches matter on a day-by-day basis for Tier 1 instruction, and then to come in with our EL coaches who are also in the Tier 1 space, working in those general ed classrooms, and also you allocated for us some support, a dyslexia a support coach as well. So those things do not go unnoticed, and they're there to be able to really help with implementation on the ground with our teachers. So I just want to highlight that as well.
Those are locally funded, so
Yes.
thanks to the community for that.
Yes,
so.
thank the community, thank the board. And I can guarantee you our teachers would all be behind us in saying how essential they are to their daily work. So that is a tremendous area of focus, the literacy for us in our work. Mathematics, as you saw today, we're very proud that we are leading the state in that area, but we don't just settle with that. We still are looking at that data to refine curriculum instruction. Math standards were brand new this year. So K-12, our teachers also, we talked about literacy, but our teachers also had new math standards last year and had to implement that. We're looking at bolstering student engagement and rigor, again, through coaching and PLCs, and really looking at those students needing targeted support now in those intervention classes, whether it's early intervention or remedial classes, with how to accelerate content for that. So that's what our improvement efforts in math are related to. Mr. Keyser mentioned science a bit. I can tell you that our science content specialists are very focused on emphasizing the doing of science. That is how our students will learn and retain that information. So throughout our classrooms in the district K-12, we have a focus on inquiry-based instruction, interactive learning experiences, development of common lab experiences to promote equity and engagement across every school in our county. And we're really excited about the creation and revision of instructional planning guides. You mentioned the resources that teachers need to be able to do this well. Our content specialists are pivotal in gathering teacher teams together to create that. And that's our emphasis within science. Social studies as well, we're providing professional learning. You're going to see here a big focus with the literacy, also in science. How do we combine cross-content work? Because literacy transcends all of our content areas. And in social studies, we really are aligning rigorous writing practices with our standards-based assessments, certainly looking again at inquiry-based and engagement-centered strategies with critical thinking and active participation. And then the last three bullets on this slide really alludes to our strategic plan priorities within teaching and learning. We are still focused on the number of English learners we have in the district and how to provide ongoing job-embedded support. Those EL coaches have been critical to providing that support in our Tier 1 instruction and utilizing those coaches for modeling of strategies in those classrooms, as well as student engagement. How do we collaborate across all of our departments to target that cognitive, effective, but also behavioral engagement from our students and sharing best practices on that. And last but not least, this is a tremendous effort, again, from our strategic plan, is focusing on consistent assessment and grading practices. If we do this well, assessment drives instruction. So when we have aligned formative and summative assessments that are strong in the rigor of the standards, it will elevate our instruction to that level. So we do believe that highlighting the need for a balanced assessment system that's very strong and comprehensive will bolster our instruction as well. So we are very engaged in providing professional learning to increase our effective assessment practices and developing consistency across the district. Some things early in the works that our secondary schools in particular have been asking for are some common midterms and finals. We're beginning that work in conversations with our leaders. Again, we feel that with a strong, robust assessment system, that also will bring up our instruction. So those are some efforts that we're working on as well. Obviously, we get this data at different times in the year, and it's a spotlight and a check for us to be able to go back in and adapt and revise and change our school improvement plans. We've been doing this across the course of the year. Our upcoming principals meeting will be taking a deep dive into the data as well. Our schools continue to analyze this and adjust the action steps to guide their work, and we collaborate with them on what professional learning these teachers need. Obviously, intentionality, coherence, and strategic planning are key. One of the things we talked a little bit about the granular data. We have some boards that will probably make some people's eyes bug, but to the student level. Because in many instances, students are 1 or 2 questions away from the next performance level. And so we really want to drill down in the data to that level and help our school leaders capture a subgroup of students that we can really intentionally target on moving to those next performance levels. So just know this is a comprehensive plan that we have along with our school leaders to support that work through our content specialists, through our principals, through our instructional coaches, through our professional learning leaders. We're coming back to revise these school improvement plans because what data needs to do is we need to take action on it. It needs to drive our actions to make sure that we're focused on the right priorities. And I feel we have a very comprehensive plan to do that.
And Dr. Brown, go back again. When you start to look at the year-end results, performance measure and so forth, you talk about the granular level, but you also, this is where the subgroups or the student group data lives, correct?
It does, and that really leads beautifully into the next slide. If I could, Mr. Young, is that okay? Because CCRPI right now, initial releases are coming. It is still embargoed, but we hope to come back, that we'll be invited back to share with you an even deeper dive into our data. And the CCRPI includes content mastery, so we can take a great look at achievement, but we also are looking at how do we close the gaps with that subgroup performance and where are those areas that we need to highlight for that, as well as progress. So we talked in our strategic plan about growth and progress. We're looking at both of those, achievement but also progress. And so CCRPI gives us a lens of that as well as readiness and graduation rate. So that data is still embargoed, but as soon as it's released, we'd love to come back and take you through what that story tells us about Forsyth County and how that leads into our future actions. So with that, it's a lot, but we welcome your questions, your feedback, anything that you have to share with us.
I just want to say thank you and such a great job. And I've said this before last year too, is that it's so important that you guys continue to focus on the pre-pandemic numbers. I know there are a lot of school systems out there, and I even think like the state of Georgia said, don't even focus on that, but we are. And it's providing you guys a target of where to go. So please don't ever lose sight of what it was before, because it provides that target, even though other school systems are not even talking about it. So I just want to say thank you for doing that. Now, it won't be easy, and we have work to do, but it's the right thing to do for our students and our community. So thank you.
Anybody else? Question, comment?
Great
Okay,
job.
Thank you.
Good job, thank you. Okay, review of policy DFL investment earnings.
Yeah, and my understanding from Larry is that there were no changes made to that upon review.
Correct. Either one of them.
Okay,
Thank you, Larry.
all righty, thank you.
Larry, I was trying to go slow and methodical, but you just went ahead and wiped them both out. Well done.
Good job.
And while I'm interrupting real quick, well, Tim Keyser's still here and Larry's still here. both of these gentlemen, and if I'm missing anybody else out there, I apologize, but special thanks to both of these guys. They're both veterans. I know we celebrated Veterans Day yesterday, but two great Americans right there.
Okay, does anybody have any future agenda items? We'll have the CCRPI, I guess, will be coming up, and nothing else? Okay, action items. We have the Homeless Awareness Month. I believe Wes.
I think Ms. Pluhar is going to come up and do a presentation, and then we got a resolution.
Okay.
Hello, good evening. It's so good to see you all. Let's get this pulled up. That's not it. Let's do that again. Okay, there it is. Thank you so much. Perfect. Well, I wanted to give you some updates. It's Homeless Awareness Month. It's both Homeless Awareness Month and Youth Homeless Awareness Month in the month of November. So we wanted to come and give some updates at the Homeless Youth Council as well as the McKinney-Vento program. Here's our logo. It's actually been updated. Thank you. So our goals in this presentation, number one, is to ensure that the 700-plus McKinney-Vento students who qualified for the program this year experience school stability, and they have that school stability during times of transition. Please remember that McKinney-Vento starts at 0 every single July, and it grows until the last day of school. Goal number two is to remove barriers to full participation in school. And goal number three is to strengthen the network of support in our community and for our students as the needs continue to grow.
Is the 700 more or less than last year?
I'm going to go into that. Give me
Okay.
a slide or two.
Okay.
But we want to make sure that our students are seen and understood, because a lot of our students would rather not be seen, and they might not be understood. So numbers talk. We're going to start with national data. So first of all, please remember that US Ed is always prior year, okay? So in 2021-22, they identified 1,579,390 students in that CBE space, that community-based education through 12th grade. That does not include higher ed, that does not include birth. And that was the highest number that we've had to date. The number for the 22-23 school year is still pending from US Ed, and we're waiting for that. In the state of Georgia last year, there were 41,487 students who qualified for the McKinney-Vento program. Now, numbers talk. Here's our local. There you all are. Hello. So we start back in 2019-20, we had 610 students who qualified for the McKinney-Vento program. In 2021, 654. In 21-22, 884. Then we jumped to 1,020. Last year, we jumped to 1,099, actually 1,100, but it was after the flagging period, but we supported him and got him the supports. And then at the date that this presentation was created, we were at 702. Yesterday, when I presented, we were at 712. Today, we ended the day at 734. So from yesterday at noon, we went from 712 students to 734 students. McKinney-Vento categorical eligibilities, this data is based on the time the presentation was created. At that time, we had 17 students who had qualified for the McKinney-Vento program that were in shelters. Our two shelters in the community are Family Haven for domestic violence, and they have a limited bed space, and we've had some challenges because they're consistently at capacity as domestic violence has increased. We also have Family Promise that is not by definition a shelter, but for McKinney-Vento coding purposes, we do qualify those students under a shelter code. Then we had 620 students who were doubled up due to economic hardship, not multi-generational housing, not I'm living here by choice or I'm helping my aging parent, but I can afford housing. Unsheltered, we had 11. That means a tree fell across their house. They had mold mitigation, they had flooding, but they still had to live in there because they didn't have another place to go. And then we had 48 students who qualified under hotels and motels. We're going to talk a little bit more about that population in a minute. So the McKinney-Vento students' needs are really fourfold: school stability, addressing academic gaps, because every time a student transitions, they can have increased academic gaps. I think we've discussed this before, but I'll put it on replay. You can expect about 6 months regression for every single school transition a student has. And then building a network of support, including resources and housing. And then youth wellness, which is what student support is all about. It's connecting students with mental health supports, resiliency coaching, student advocacy specialists, and the like, to wrap students around with that post-traumatic experience they may have had experiencing homelessness. I want to go into some definitions and differences because I know that as I've spoken to people over the past 9 years, and I know as Wes has spoken to people on the Homeless Youth Council, there have been some confusion about the definitions and differences. There are 3 programs under federal law that support homeless families and homeless individuals. The first is the McKinney-Vento Act. It was founded during the Ronald Reagan administration. It has the educational definition of homelessness. The second is the Hearth Act. That was updated about 6-7 years ago. That is the HUD definition. HUD is the national level, and then the local level is the Department of Community Affairs in the state of Georgia, okay? And then there's the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act. So under the McKinney-Vento Act and the educational definition, unsheltered individuals qualify for homeless education. Doubled up mainly qualify. There could be a few families who are multi-generational or they choose to be doubled up, but we're talking about our families who are not just doubled up. They're tripled, they're quadrupled, they're quintupled up. I had a record yesterday, 15 people in 880 square feet. Shelters, like we talked about, that's Family Haven and Family Promise, and they do qualify under McKinney-Vento. And then hotels or motels, for the most part, yes. If a family is doing their kitchen renovation and they decide to go camp out at Halcyon and stay at the hotel to give their kids a break from the renovation, that's not going to qualify for McKinney-Vento. But if the plumber bursts the pipe and they can't move into their house during the renovation, then we'd probably be talking. Now, under the HUD definition and that state level Department of Community Affairs, unsheltered, yes, they qualify. Doubled up, they don't qualify. They get really, really finicky when we say we have a doubled up family. But there is an exception to that. If a family is going to lose their housing within 14 days or has 24 hours of imminent homelessness, they could qualify and receive assistance from HUD. Shelters, yes. Hotels and motels is very restricted. A nonprofit or a government agency needs to pay for emergency hotel assistance for a family to receive HUD assistance. And then we're going to go ahead and skip over to runaway and homeless youth, and then I'm going to talk about at risk of homelessness at the end, okay? So with runaway and homeless youth, those are the youth that run away from home, and they have a whole program to support them through RYHA. I always want to transpose those 2 middle letters. Unsheltered, yes. Doubled up, yes. Shelters, yes. Hotels and motels, if it's not safe for the youth to stay with their family, yes. Their job is to mitigate the safety of runaway and homeless youth so that they don't run into further or larger scale issues. Now, at risk of homelessness. McKinney-Vento does not cover at risk of homelessness. So when one of my colleagues calls me and says, hey, there's a family that's going to be evicted in 2 weeks, and they say, you need to qualify them for the McKinney-Vento program, we need to get ahead of this. And I'll say, I'm sorry, I can't qualify them until they actually qualify under homelessness because they're homeless. But through the Department of Community Affairs, we may be able to mitigate some of that. Through local resources, we may be able to mitigate some of that to be able to avoid eviction. That's always our goal and always our hope to wrap around those resources. And then for runaway and homeless youth, if they're at risk of separation from a family, they will qualify. So now we're going to talk about some myth busters. The first myth is all homeless people live on the streets. Well, the reality is they don't. We just talked about all the different categorical eligibilities. A lot of our families, a lot of our unaccompanied homeless youth, they sofa surf. I know I've said this before, I'm going to put it on replay. Our families, they oftentimes, when I started 9 years ago, they've moved 3 to 4 times a year. Now they're moving every 2 to 3 weeks. Some of them are moving every 2 to 3 days because there's so much transition. If you think about the 15 people in 880 square feet, that's not going to be sustainable for very long. And so our families are looking for a safe place to stay. They're sofa surfing. They're staying in garages, different places. Hotel hopping. That's another trend. I heard Cobb County say it 18 months ago, and I said, oh boy, I hope that doesn't happen. But we're seeing it. A lot of our families cannot afford, as hotel rooms and rates have increased, to continue to stay a full week in a hotel. Or maybe single moms who work at Cracker Barrel or Waffle House or Huddle House. They think their paycheck's going to be X. Their employer gives it. They didn't count 5 hours, and they can't make the payment for the hotel. So they go on Hotels.com, and when they go on Hotels.com, they wind up looking for the cheapest rate, which puts our families moving from Forsyth County, where they've lived, over to Duluth, over to Hall County, over to Douglas County, over to Gainesville, every which way in between, and we're tracking them down and supporting them. And then shelters. We talked about that. And then a second myth that exists is homelessness as a choice. And the reality is that families that qualify for the McKinney-Vento program have a lot of life happens moments. They might have job loss. It could be the family that they were staying with, the grandparent, and they were in a multi-generational situation, passed away, and now they have no place to go. Or it could be that a parent was hospitalized and the other parent needed to take care of the parent who was hospitalized, and that led to a job loss, which led to the inability to pay rent or to pay their mortgage, and then evictions happen. Unexpected medical expenses, domestic violence has been on the increase, and they're just not earning enough. So the National Coalition for Low Income has this slide. Now, if you ask me how they're coming up with the 140 hours, I can bring you through parts of it, but some of it is undisclosed. Okay? So they're putting the minimum wage at $7.25. Now, in Forsyth County, you might find a place that pays you $15 an hour. At $7.25 an hour, you need to work 140 hours to pay for rent for a one-bedroom, and they're putting the fair market rate rent at $1,320. Okay? We know that the fair market rate rent in the Metro Atlanta area is much more than $1,320. A two-bedroom is listed as $1,507, but a two-bedroom in the area, the Metro Atlanta area in Forsyth County, is on the upper end of $2,200, $2,400 and above. So our families, for fair market rate rent at $15 an hour, are still working 140 hours a week or more to be able to pay for housing, to be able to pay, if they're a single parent, to be able to pay for car insurance, phone insurance, groceries, etc. And that's why the McKinney-Vento program exists, is to go ahead and work with the wraparound support so that our families can mitigate and build towards sustainability. We have a great partnership with Family Promise, the Place of Forsyth, United Way, and all of our nonprofits to build a network of support. We want to thank the Board of Education, the Superintendent's Cabinet, and our school leaders for supporting the 75 unaccompanied homeless youth in our community, and for what you're doing in support of them for the holidays and every single day, what you do to support our homeless families. And now I will pass the floor back to Wes.
Thank you for that. It's amazing work that you're doing and the connection you've built with these students and the families in the school system that are facing homelessness. Any questions or anything from you guys? We are doing that drive. You want to go back to that other slide. And so if you guys remember last year, this board was like, hey, we need to give some of these students some hoodies. And we're like, yeah, it'd be really cool if we could get 400 hoodies. And we got together, all of us, and worked together, and we ended up getting 1,600 hoodies, and it was really amazing. And just seeing the kids, get those hoodies. Everybody needs a hoodie, right? But this year, I think we did something a little different, and we're like, we can up the game, right? And so we have created two different ways and avenues to help the homeless youth this year. The first one is when you look at the homeless youth population, you have the unaccompanied youth. These are the youth that maybe not have an adult in their lives or things like that. And then you have the other students that you talked about. They're doubling up and things like that. The school system and the leadership team at the school system has taken on the unaccompanied youth. And every leadership team is almost signed up, and I think we have a full list. Josh has been doing good. The list is full, and so we can say all the unaccompanied youth this year will have a holiday or a Christmas, whichever is for them, this year, which is really huge. But then the Place of Forsyth is one of our partners with the Homeless Youth Council, and they do a holiday house. And the holiday house is really well known and supported through the community. But when you work for the holiday house and talk to them about donation ideas, they get a lot for the younger kids, because holidays and Christmas are about the younger kids, not so much the teenagers. So we want to help that, right? We want to get this out there and see how we can help the holiday house promote teenage items and get those donated to them. And so just a couple of items that are on this list that some of these students, teenagers are asking for are fuzzy socks, blankets, duffel bags, backpacks, wallets, water bottles, shampoo and hair products, toiletry bags, and earbuds. And so we actually have 3 locations that are going to be available for drop-off. We'll do some campaigning amongst the board here of just trying to get it out there. But Eric Rose State Farm on Peachtree Parkway, and then Premier Automotive Diagnostics off of Cumming Highway, and then BCC Engineering off of Windward. Going to be some locations in some of the schools that you can drop off the stuff for teenagers. But we want to really make sure that the teenagers have a good holiday this year that are with the holiday house. So that's what we're supporting this year. And so thank you to the school system. Thank you for the leadership, because the unaccompanied youth are going to have a great year because of you guys. So thank you for that.
We're very thankful.
So is it really hard to keep up with them?
With all the families,
Well, like with unaccompanied youth?
the unaccompanied homeless youth, I would say they're maybe a little bit more stable than some of my families who are moving every 2 to 3 days.
They're resilient.
They're resilient, and they're going to find a way to get to school. And they're going to, even if they move around, they're going to find a way to get to school because school is a safe space for them. And that's the one thing that I didn't talk about in this presentation, but as you heard Dr. Bartlett talk about, and you know from student support, is we built a network of support, and our students have connections. They will come for the snacks at high school. They will come for the lunches. They will come for the community that they have the trusted adult in. And for our younger youth, it's the same thing. And so because we do identify them, we keep a close eye on them to make sure we know what's going on and to mitigate any harm or concerns that we might have. Our families that are moving more frequently are one of my concerns, because a lot of my families are moving from Forsyth County all the way to Maine or New Jersey or California, but they're having trouble getting into school because they may not be able to access the McKinney-Vento liaison in the same way. When I find out about it, I'm after the McKinney-Vento liaison in a different state, you know? But sometimes we have students who come back and they haven't been in school for 6 months. Thank you for asking. Are there any other questions?
So we have a resolution that you guys have adopted or are going to adopt, and I was going to read it, but I'm going to save the staff because they're the only ones here today. But I do want to point out a little bit one section here and why this is so important. Youth without a high school diploma or a GED are 346% more likely to experience homelessness than those that have graduated high school. That's why it's so important that we focus on these students. We give the resources we need these students so they graduate. And if they graduate, they have an opportunity. And so we need to do that. And so then at the end of this resolution, it just says that November is recognized as Homeless Awareness Month in Forsyth County Schools, and the board commits to increasing awareness, providing resources, and collaborating with local organizations to support homeless youth. So thank you for all you guys' help.
Thank you all.
We need a motion to adopt it. Do I have a motion to adopt the resolution? Motion by Lindsay, second by Mike. All in favor? Unanimous.
Thank you. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you, Kim.
Okay, and the next action item is literacy legislation. Oh, I thought I messed up. Literacy legislation and high-quality instructional material certification with Amy Bartlett.
Yes, here
There
I am
you are again.
So, speaking of literacy, we're back. I've got 2 additional members of our department, our K-5 ELA specialist, Dr. Courtney Bean, and our coordinator of academic services, Mrs. Katie Carlson, and we are here to present to you how we're aligning our literacy practices to the state legislation. Specifically tonight, every Board of Education in Georgia is required to certify that we are using high-quality instructional materials in our K-3 classes. That certification needs to happen by December of this year, and then after this, by August 1st of every school year, that the school boards need to certify that we have gone through a vetting process to make sure we're using high-quality instructional materials to teach literacy. So these 2 wonderful ladies will take you through the law, a little deeper understanding, and then what we are using here in Forsyth County.
Good evening, everybody. How are you?
Good evening. Good.
So we are going to align this to our district goals. Most importantly, our strategic plan and the learner experience. Our goal is to increase student growth and achievement. And it does fit into 2 of our governance goals, the alignment of strategies, initiatives, and resources to the FCS learner profile, and also effective and efficient financial planning, because we do have these resources currently in place in all of our classrooms in the K-3 setting. The reason why we're here today is to talk about key Georgia legislation. And over the past several years, there has been a number of legislational opportunities that have come up in regards to foundational literacy and the needs of our youngest learners in the classroom. In the 2019 session, the dyslexia law, State Bill 48, was first introduced. That kind of got the ball rolling with all of this. There were several revisions and conversations, and so we're just now seeing a lot of that come into play. But in 2023, the Georgia Literacy Act, House Bill 538, was enacted, and that brought us a lot more clarity to the pieces of the puzzle that we needed to complete and comply with, but for the right reasons inside of our classrooms. Then finally, last year, during the 2024 session, Senate Bill 464, which is the dyslexia screening law, was enacted. And so that added another layer of requirements to us for what screeners can and should be used in the classrooms for K-3 students. So all of those legislative pieces, with a few others that were not mentioned here, came together in an aligning literacy practices document, which involved 5 key components that impact us today. High-quality instructional materials, and that's for kindergarten through 3rd grade, focusing on the literacy domains and foundational literacy. And Dr. Beam's going to share a little bit more about that in just a minute. Number 2 is screening. We are required to have universal screening 3 times a year for all of our K-3 students on the foundational literacy domains, and a dyslexia screening window 1 time per year. We currently have that during the winter, so we will screen in August, December, and March for our universal screening, and then that December window will also serve as our dyslexia screener window. The third component is supports. So we do have tiered reading supports and characteristics of dyslexia plans that we use in the classrooms in our Tier 1 and intervention spaces for all students. Fourth component is teacher training. We do have state-approved professional learning modules for all of our K-3 teachers, including our electives teachers, everybody that works with our kindergarten through 3rd grade students and supervises them. So they are completing a 25-hour module course, and it is pretty intense, but we are really happy with the results we're seeing and the alignment to the work we're doing. And then there are also plans for future teacher preparation. So teachers who are graduating from the University System of Georgia and coming into the profession will have this training as part of their repertoire coming into our classrooms. And then the 5th required component is reporting. So we do have regular informed parent communication that is required, and then state reporting elements that come up every time we have a universal screening window, a parent reporting window, a teacher training window. We do certify and report that data to the state directly.
Do you have the dyslexia screening for above 3rd grade?
That's a great question. The approved dyslexia screeners are all certified K through 3rd grade. So we do not have it universal for all students above that, but we do have options to use some of those tools if we need to. Correct.
Not every student.
It is.
Just those that are identified by a teacher or somewhere else.
Well, we are going to put in place in the winter window specific parameters about who we would want to
Okay.
go further with, but it is not universal.
Okay.
It's a great question. Thank you. Anything else? Any other questions about the required components?
I have a dumb question.
There's
So
no
when-
dumb questions.
When you're saying we're screening all these kids, like who's physically, is it the teachers that are physically screening all these kids?
Yes, it is the classroom teachers and support teachers and coaches who are screening all of these students.
I mentioned that parent communication that comes with that.
Yes, right now we are using iReady as our screener, and there is a parent component that comes at the end of every screening window, so they do receive their child's results. And then we also provide another letter that says what we are doing with that information to support their child in the classroom.
What does it look like, the screening? I mean, just.
Sure.
synopsis.
The universal screener it has 2 components. It has a adaptive digital diagnostic tool. So it's computer-based, anywhere from about 30 minutes to an hour, sometimes longer. The second piece of it is a one-on-one teacher to student reading measure. That's about a 1 or 2 minute task. So it includes both parts. And then the dyslexia screener adds 2 additional 1-minute tasks that look at specific areas related to dyslexia.
Did I misunderstand you? Did you say the state training was 2,500 hours?
25 hours.
Oh, 25. Like, how in the world is it doing this?
25 hours now.
Okay.
But I will say that's 25, that's a conservative estimate. It took us, I mean, it's taking us that number of hours, and we're pretty experienced in this information. So for new teachers, it's upwards. Not quite that long, but yes. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Bean because she's going to talk about our high-quality instructional materials.
Thank you. Good evening. So I am so excited and proud to report that we have been following the science of reading since we came back from COVID. So in 2021, we unveiled our FCS Literacy Essentials, which are built on the comprehensive body of research known as the science of reading. So we toured all schools, we explained why these components are necessary, and then we took a good hard look at our resources and where we needed to become stronger. So the first thing we did is notice that our phonemic awareness and phonics instruction was not as solid as it should be, and the resources weren't in place that we needed to have. We know that for children who struggle to read, that is the deficit area. That phonemic awareness and phonics instruction has to be solid.
Can you just very, very briefly define phonemic
Yes.
awareness?
Yes, I can. So phonemic awareness is the ability to discern sounds in language. So it's independent of print. And the previous thinking was that for someone who struggled to read, that it's the phonics component that's challenging, but that's not the case. When you think about our brains, and I can get really nerdy here, it's pretty fascinating to consider that we were not designed to read. We were designed for spoken language. So this ability to discern these individual speech sounds and match them to symbol for reading is a miraculous thing. We actually change our brain structure. And we know more in the past 2 decades because of fMRI than we have ever known in the past. It's truly, truly an exciting time in education. So right away, we implemented Hegarty phonemic awareness instruction for all of our kindergarten and first grade classrooms. And then 2 years ago, we implemented UFly foundations for phonics instruction. So we were not waiting for legislation to tell us what needed to happen. We wanted to act immediately, knowing that 95% of 6-year-old children, of first grade children, can and should exit first grade capable of reading if they've had access to the right instruction. So we implemented that right away post-COVID. What we're doing then is taking what's called a bundled approach. So that means we're relying upon Hegarty for our phonemic awareness instruction, UFly foundations for our phonics instruction, and we have adopted Benchmark as a tool for our fluency, vocabulary, comprehension, and writing instruction. So that's what we put forward and propose to you today for your approval for our high-quality instructional materials in grades K through 3.
I just want to point out something that you said, just how, you've been doing this work since 2021. You're not waiting for legislation. And since I've been on the board, that's how it's been. Like, we have experts here. You all lead the way, and I just, you don't wait for the board to tell you what to do. You all are the experts. You're always on the cutting edge, and I just really appreciate that. So just want to make sure the community knows that we're in good hands. We've always been in good hands. So I appreciate all your work.
Thank you. And I will tell you, we are seeing the results in our data, our iReady data already. The first screening has shown tremendous gains in that space for our earliest readers. So we're delighted about that.
So just to articulate, we did use the vetting rubric supplied by the Georgia Department of Education as we went through this bundled approach for all of our resources. We really worked hard to look at the best resources we had at our fingertips, and you can see the combination and the bundling there, but that rubric was used. And so today we're asking you, as our superintendent, Mr. Young, and the board, we're recommending that you approve the high-quality instructional materials that we've vetted using establishing the rubric for vetting supplemental instructional materials provided by the Georgia Department of Education as our Forsyth County Schools principal course of study for kindergarten through third grade in compliance with House Bill 538, the Georgia Early Literacy Act.
Yeah, and I submit this to the board. I recommend to you all that this is approved.
Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. Motion by Tom, second by Mike. Any questions,
I'll
discussion?
say we've come a long, long way. I remember when we started and I moved up here, my kids were coming from private to public school, and we went from phonetics to sight words. So we had a great big discussion about that very simplistic ideal. So it's now a science.
Yes.
And I've heard over the last few years how that's grown. And I always thought maybe I had Dane Bramage, but we won't go there. So we've come a long way from when I grew up and when I moved up here, and we've still continued to push that top edge. So I appreciate that.
As Dr. Bean says, it's a very exciting time in the world of education, but it does take time to work with our teachers and bring that professional learning to them up on the latest research and evidence-based practices. But we've been doing this for several years and have a very comprehensive plan moving forward.
I love her enthusiasm when I asked that question. Phenomenal awareness. I haven't seen anybody that animated since Josh Lowe's last calendar. So that was fantastic, Courtney.
Thank you.
Okay, all in favor of approval? Unanimous. Next, we have executive session for personnel. Do I have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Motion by Tom, second by Mike. All in favor? Unanimous.